We are part of the Fired Up Sports Network of shows. Please check out other Fired Up Sports Network podcasts like the P-Lot Pod, Water Cooler Talk, Bell Smashers, Philly Sports Love and Pain, Drunk on Broad, Beer Battered Sports, and the Fired Up Sports Show, which are available on all major podcasting hosting sites and social media. Also, check out Mark Ramos' Roundup on firedupsports.com, which breaks down the happenings going on with all your favorite local teams.
The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions.
Swinging a miss, struck him out. The Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions of Baseball.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Flyers are going to win the Stanley Cup. The Flyers win the Stanley Cup for the lead. Yes!
Iverson, wow, what a fake off Daniels as he broke his ankles and got all the way to the cup.
Well, good morning. We got episode 202 kicking off the 200s. Yeah, the other night, Rich and I, we kind of went old. We went like OG Drunk on Broad. We were doing we actually hit all 5 sports in one night, but
Oh man,
this show's dedicated, Drunk on the Court, all things Sixers. Unfortunately, we're here doing a memorial show because, you know, the series kind of played out the way that some people thought it might. Sixers go down in 6. All things considered, Mark, a great showing by both teams. It was probably, the best first round matchup of all the first round matchups. Felt more like a second round matchup than anything, considering the level of play that you got from both teams competitively. The officiating left a lot to be desired, as we've seen across a lot of different NBA, series, even into this second round. There's a lot of people questioning the authenticity of the officiating, but when you look at the contributions that you're getting from the Knicks bench versus what you got from the Sixers, even from the role players, not even off the bench, it's not a wonder why they were able to win the games they were able to win, able to pull it out in the way that they were able to pull it out. Just pointing end to probably what was Joel Embiid's last, his last season of play. You look at it, and his best, to be honest, his best season as a professional. When I look at how he played and how he just kind of set himself apart, the injuries unfortunately kept him kind of at bay. I got to imagine if he played a healthy season, he'd be able to run away with the MVP and really guide this team deep into a deep playoff run. But even as it stood, with half a face and one leg, he was still averaging almost 35 and double digit rebounds, with the assists to go with it and the blocks. And just unfortunately, they didn't get contributions from anywhere else. So, Mark, I'm going to hand the baton to you and let you give your thoughts here.
yeah. It was such a. I was looking at things the other day from that series, and I think I'm pretty sure the Sixers had a higher field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, and free throw percentage than the Knicks in that series.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing that you go home in 6 games with that, knowing that. I think really what it comes down to is that I feel like those late game situations are still there's still like a bugaboo for this team. I don't really know why that keeps happening. That there's been different coaches, there's been different players in here. There's going to be some turnover again this summer. So
Yeah.
I'm not really sure how that keeps happening late in games. It feels like a fundamental thing, but then you kind of like you step back from it and you're just kind of like, how can it be a fundamental thing when we're talking about professional athletes here? But
Right.
you know, like I was just watching too. I was watching this Knicks Pacers series, and the Knicks are up 2-1 in that series. The Pacers won last night, and the Knicks are doing like I mean Josh Hart the other night. I mean he had 18 rebounds.
I mean,
Putting up his
he is playing. I mean, here's I said this to Rich on Thursday night.
Mhm.
This team reminds me a lot of that Iverson team with the Sixers that made that run to the finals.
Mhm.
Like you had Iverson and a lot of role players. That Knicks team has Brunson and a bunch of role players and a guy
Yeah.
and guys that are just contributing up and down the roster. And I heard an interview with on the PHLY with Anthony Gargano and Jay Wright. And Jay Wright profusely expounding on the culture that they bring, that he brought to Villanova, and the types of players that he was looking to bring, and what that does for the culture of the team, and how that baton just gets handed off. And you see that with those three guys. You
Mhm.
see that with what essentially what people are calling the Nova Knicks,
Yeah.
because you're looking at what they bring to that culture,
Mhm.
and the contributions go. And I'll let you go on with Josh Hart and DiVincenzo and Brunson and what they bring to that Knicks team.
Yeah, I mean Brunson's been he's been incredible. I didn't think, not that anybody really thought, but I mean, I never thought that he'd be this player, at the NBA level. Maybe he'd be a good, you know, point guard and a good player. And but I never thought that he'd be like this high end, you know. And
Mhm.
also that like, I know the Sixers were very, very upset with it, but like this, when he gets to the rim and he stops short and he draws the contact and all, and he like uses a player's momentum against them to draw this contact and all.
Mhm.
Um, as good of a player in the league at doing that, and I don't know if that's like because he's a lot smaller than guys or whatever it is, even for like traditional point guards in the league today. But I mean, he's
Seriously.
been great. He's been great. He was great in the Sixers series. He was great in. Um, I think the Sixers went. They put a lot of their resources in trying to contain him, and they took their chances with the other guys like Hart and
Mhm.
DiVincenzo and Miles McBride and these guys, and those guys stepped up. And you know, there are some of their parts, and I think like when you look at like the talent level and things like that, you kind of just
Yeah.
there's something else there, right? Like it has to be culture.
Truly.
It has to be like just playing for the right guy in the right system and things like that and how they kind of utilize your strengths. It has to be that. And I think looking at those numbers that I just mentioned about the Sixers, earlier, I mean, that's something that I think really they need to keep in mind this summer when they decide to go and look at acquisitions and stuff because they're going to be busy. It sounds like Morey said it. The post game or the postseason press
Right.
conference thing, all but said that the Sixers are going to be pretty aggressive. So, um, but it's not just about talent. And I think the Knicks have proven that they have good players, but not they're not exactly, LeBron's Heat team, as far as
No,
stars.
not at all. But
So,
and listen, we'll talk about the roster construction in a minute for
mhm,
what their plans are to do this summer. But like, the the last time we talked, we were talking about the Sixers coming home and to look at the way that Game 6 played out. What there wasn't a more fitting way for the Tobias Harris era to end with a situation where he plays Game 6, plays 29 minutes, and goes scoreless.
Yeah.
To see the fact that you lose a game by 3 points and you had two starters, he and Kyle Lowry, both go scoreless.
Yeah.
And listen, in a game where Buddy Hield finally finds the court and goes off and scores 20 in 21 minutes.
Mhm.
But you can't have a Game 6 where the season's on the line and you're a max contract player and you go scoreless. Like
Yeah.
you couldn't. If Tobias Harris contributes, they win that game.
Yeah.
You have to figure. They're not running plays for him. He's got to figure out a way to contribute on the court, and you didn't do it in any other category, right?
No.
Because his stat line was also 4 rebounds, 3 assists. Like he was a 0.
Hmm.
And for all intents and purposes, and Rich was saying this on Thursday night, Kyle Lowry was a 0 too.
Mm.
He was 2 rebounds, 3 assists. Like those two guys combined for 0 points, 6 assists, and 6 rebounds.
Yeah.
That you can't have that in a closeout game, and think that you're gonna. And here's the thing, and they were still within earshot of winning that game.
Yeah.
Every game in this series. I remember listening to, I can't remember what game it was, but they were talking about an interview with Nick Nurse, and it might have been Game 6, where they were talking about what are your end of the game strategies, and what's the game plan, and then Nick Nurse's summation of this was kind of apropos for this series. Was like, well, there really is no plan. There's no game plan. There's nothing, because at the end of the game, it's going to come down to one possession, and we're going to have to figure out how to win that possession, whether it's on offense or defense.
Mm.
And without fail, outside of the one game where Joel Embiid scores 50, this series, every game came down to one possession at the end of the game. And the Knicks found ways to win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, the late game stuff, I mean, like under 3 minutes and things like that. I mean, this is something we've seen with this organization over and over and over now.
Yep.
And I don't know if it's a player personnel thing. I don't know if it's an execution thing. I don't know why it keeps happening when the group looks different. I mean, this team was very different than the team that started the year. And they, it doesn't matter. It doesn't seem to matter who's there, or who's here rather. And they continue to have these issues late in games.
Yeah.
And I mean, there were nights where, I mean, they got out hustled, whether it was for, on the defensive glass, the offensive glass, whatever it was. The Knicks kind of, I hate to harp on that old, sports cliche, but it looked like the Knicks just wanted it more in those situations. And, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen, or it's not going to happen here and fly with people. And as you saw, people were very upset with, what had happened in this series, because now, it was before where it looked like we couldn't get out of the second round. Now we can't get out of the first round. You know what I mean?
Now listen, Mark, if there was ever a shirt that summarized Tobias Harris's career, it's this one. The verbiage, for those of you that are going to listen after the fact, the verbiage on the t-shirt says, I scored the same number of points as Tobias Harris in a playoff game.
Oh boy.
That to me is is everything you need to know about what this guy. Well, and listen, he got his bag, right?
Mhm.
He
Oh, yeah.
capitalized the situation. The Sixers essentially chose Brett Brown over Jimmy Butler.
Mhm.
I would be really curious to go back into an alternative universe where they sign Jimmy Butler and don't sign Tobias Harris, and what the trajectory of that franchise looks like with the last couple years of Jimmy Butler
Mhm.
and Maxey and Embiid, because you would does Jimmy Butler keep Ben Simmons in line? Does Ben Simmons still end up at the Met Gala on Thursday night? What does that what would that have looked like? Because that contract really handcuffed this franchise for the last handful of years, and it
Yeah.
controlled every decision that they made, and the offseason moves and the guys that they were able to pursue and who they could bring in, and it really made it difficult to build a roster around your stars. And I really think that the star that you have to build this roster around is Tyrese Maxey,
Mhm.
right? You know what you're going to get out of Embiid, but you know that Embiid cannot be the guy that closes out the game.
Right.
He doesn't have the fluidity to be able to handle the end of the game situations on a night by night basis. Where
Yeah.
you saw Tyrese Maxey in this Knicks series, right? In the game where he hits the end of the game shot, sends it into overtime. You saw him have that ability to be able to do that.
Yeah. The thing I think about Tyrese too, it's like and it's something that all the greats learn how to do, but it takes time. It takes a little bit of time. Like when you're learning to be the guy late in a playoff game, everybody went through it. All guy and most of them, they began by failing. I mean, Jordan struggle, LeBron, any great like that you can think of, they had to learn how to be the guy in the
Mm-hmm.
postseason. I do think Tyrese has the makeup to do that.
Yeah,
And would be, and he's very, very, he's such a gem for the organization, both now and in the future. But to go back to the Harris thing for a minute was like, just, I think we should say too, that if you go back and you look at when they signed him to that contract was an anchor the day they signed it. Harris was a player that had bounced around the league prior to that. A lot of his issues, um, or shortcomings rather, they were always those shortcomings. He was always
mm-hmm.
seen as a
Absolutely.
talented guy but there was something missing there.
Mark, think about this real quick before you go to the next thought. He
Mhm.
was always the guy that got moved. He was
Yes.
always the guy that was good enough to be included in the trade, but
Mhm.
never good enough for the team to keep.
Right. And really, for a contender, he was probably at best like your fourth, fifth option, you know? And the Sixers
Absolutely.
kinda made him by proxy, really, by the number of the deal that he was getting, he was gonna be, come hell or high water, their third, their trio. He was gonna complete the trio.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was just, it was bad business. It was bad business when they did it. And,
Truly.
wish him well. Hope he, finds his niche somewhere else. But it won't be here. And, it couldn't have come any sooner.
Yeah, no, listen, you're not wrong. And the I'm going back through some of this stuff that we kind of shared back and forth through the playoffs. But
Mhm.
like the fact that you have at the all right, so in Ben Simmons' last playoff game as a Sixer, or last playoff game, Ben Simmons 5 points on 2 of 4 shooting. Tobias Harris 0 points on 2 shots. In that final year, Ben Simmons makes $31 million. Tobias Harris makes 40.
it's amazing to me, like whether you're the guy or not.
Mhm.
Like, how do you take 2 shots in an NBA game? Like,
Well,
I
yeah,
don't think.
listen, in a starting
Yeah.
role. Like I just so Mark, the stat you had mentioned earlier, the 76ers in that series had a higher field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, and free throw percentage than the Knicks
Mhm.
in that series.
Yeah.
The when you look at the most points in the postseason through that first round, Rick Brunson, Rick Brunson, Jalen Brunson, 172, Maxi 162, and Embiid 159. Like
Yeah.
the point, if I remember correctly, the point differential for the teams was within 1 point at the
1
end of the
point.
game six. With the
Mhm.
end of game six, like it's just it's a thing that just boggles my mind. But here's the thing: you've got since the process in 13-14, you've got nothing but disappointment in the playoffs.
Yeah.
You're looking at since then Boston has been in 10 playoffs with 5 Eastern Conference Finals. Milwaukee has been in 9 playoffs with 2 Eastern Conference Finals. Miami, 8 playoffs, 4 Eastern Conference Finals. Toronto, 8 playoffs, 2. Atlanta, 7 playoffs, 2 Eastern Conference Finals. Indianapolis with 1 appearance. The Sixers in 7 playoff runs with zero series, not even Eastern Conference final, like 0 Eastern Conference Finals appearances in the last
Yeah.
7 years.
Hey.
Now listen, I will argue with you that you had to go through the process. You were floundering in that 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Mhm.
That you had to do something different. And you gave yourself a really good shot. I won't say the best shot because there were a lot of draft picks. And Mark, we could do a whole show on the guys that they missed and should have taken.
Yeah.
The Jaylen Browns and the Jason Tatums of the world. Hindsight being what it was. A guy that we'll talk about in a couple minutes with the offseason moves and Brandon Ingram. When you
Mhm.
took Ben Simmons, but Ben Simmons was the consensus number 1 overall,
Yeah.
generational next, this generation's Magic Johnson. Like but for whatever reason, it has not worked out. And as we start to transit, anything you want to talk about in this next series before we kind of transition, because Adam's got some questions for us before we kind of jump into the off-season plans.
Sure. Yeah, I think just to kind of put a bow on that part, I look at I've been watching the playoffs pretty closely, and these second rounds have been really, I mean, like, yeah, look at Minnesota, like
Oh,
they're like they seem like the next one. Ant Edwards seems like the next one. It's really fun.
he's a
Luca's
guy,
finally.
Mark. He's the guy that I love to watch outside of Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Him, and then a guy that we'll talk about on the hockey show in a little bit. He reminds me a lot of like a Connor McDavid.
Yeah. Yeah.
A guy that just like you just love, that you can turn on the tube and just watch.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun. Um, that whole group there. I mean, I remember looking at that roster configuration early, when they drafted him and they signed Gobert and things like that. And I was like, what are they doing? Like, they got Towns already, but it's
Yo,
like,
for real.
Cat, I mean, has embraced the whatever role they've asked him to do, which I think he deserves a lot of credit for. Um, and it's kind of cool with being the Robin to Ant's Batman. And I think if you're
Yeah,
gonna if you're gonna like tie yourself to somebody, that's a good guy to tie yourself to.
right.
Um, I mean, like I look at Dallas and Luca and Kyrie, kind of they have this interesting pairing that works and things like that. And they've been fun to watch for me. So I think like just looking around the league, and I still see though something to keep in mind with the Sixers as we kind of like move into like the next part of our show. These guys also have really, really good, even if they're depth guys
Mhm.
that like, you know, they do enough things out there where, they're not just like sole purpose, like, corner three guys or
Right.
whoever, they can actually they can make plays and they've contributed. Alexander Walker for the Timberwolves has been fantastic. Like it's
Right.
a spot up guy, like, hitting the big shots from beyond the arc and stuff. So the Sixers need to be on the hunt for guys like that, right? Like so
Mm-hmm.
um the playoffs have been really, really fun, and I think they're also a good not measuring stick, but kind of more looking at what other teams are doing and looking at how
Mm-hmm.
we're going to try to mold this next year. Because as far as the Embiid stuff goes, I mean, like we don't know how much more time we have with him being as elite as he's been. He's
Well,
getting older now,
and
so.
we'll go to one of Adam's questions, right? How much longer
Mhm.
do you think Embiid will be with the Sixers? Listen, Mark, I think for me, I'm gonna ride that train as long as I can
Yes.
because I've seen I got a little preview this season of what life is like without him.
Yeah.
In a situation that looks rudderless and confused and unsure. Because the second that you trade him, you're starting over again.
Yeah.
What you're going to get back in a trade with Embiid is never going to be comparable to what you're getting on the court with him.
Yeah.
If it's
Yeah.
if it's draft picks, if it's a pile of role players, right? Like look no further than the history of any trade in any sport. The best guy in the trade is going to a team that's going to win the trade.
Yeah.
Whoever gets the best guy is going to win the trade regardless.
Mhm.
And you can't convince me otherwise, right? Look at, I'm trying to think of listen, look at the Charles Barkley trade,
Yeah.
right? And like you're getting guys back like Andrew Lang, like you're getting, like the JT Real Muto trade, right? With the Phillies, right? You gave up Sixto Sanchez, which you thought was like going to be like the next coming of,
Yeah.
and he looks like he's playing, like he should be playing in the Delco Sunday League. Like it's like for real. Like he looked like he ate Sixto Sanchez.
Yeah.
It's, so how much longer? It is kind of is what it is.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a hard question. That's a good question, Adam. Like
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know, but I'm with you. I think like you have to kind of ride it out with him, and you don't know how many more elite seasons you're gonna get, so that's why this summer's so important, right? Like you have to, you have to put this team in a position where they can get over that hump,
Mm-hmm.
and so we'll see what happens. And to reference that question he had asked prior, that Adam asked prior about Buddy Hield and Kyle Lowry, you know, um, I, I'd be interested in bringing Buddy back. I think Lowry, in terms of like vet minimum kind of contract, and somebody who's kind of going to be there to, he's going to play a little bit. He's going to kind of be like a player coach type of thing. I'm sure there will be interest, but I don't, I don't know what his plans are here, or whether or not he wants to kind of pick up and move again and things like that. He's already home, so
Yeah,
he might.
it's all going to depend on their role. What role
Yes.
do they want? What's the salary look like for
Mhm.
the roster construction? Because Kyle Lowry's probably going to be looking at a vet minimum ish kind of deal.
Yeah.
He's what 38. Like
Yeah, he's up there.
he's on the this could be like the swan song for him.
Mhm.
Um, I got to imagine that, but there's guys that are comparable to Buddy Hield. I'd be curious to see what a full season would look like. With him, I feel like there was a lot of unsureness of what he was supposed to do, his role,
Right.
especially when it came to the playoffs. It felt like when he was in the playoffs, he felt like it was like hot potato, like he
Yeah.
couldn't get the ball out fast enough. So I don't know. I'm looking at how do I make this roster better? Even a guy that we've been kind of fond of in Kelly Oubre.
Yeah.
He's to me a guy that I would be interested in bringing back, but bringing back in a much lesser role. A guy in like a 6th, 7th man off the bench.
Yeah.
A guy that can come off the bench and give you energy. That's the role that I see for him, but not in like he's not a guy that I want to bring back in a starting role.
He's one of these guys too. And I think Buddy kind of fits that role as well. Where they're probably going to get a nice deal somewhere. I'm not sure though if the Sixers should be the team to give them that. Like they have other things they have to figure out but before they get down to that on their to-do list.
Mhm.
And I think just based on he had an up and down playoff, and Buddy was struggling in the postseason as well. But I do think that they'll get what they're looking for, contract and salary wise. I just don't know if it should be here. And you don't want to box yourself out, right? You're in a position where they have all this cap space. You don't want to put yourself in a position where you're kind of like, boxing yourself into these players who are just really, and I'm not knocking it at all, but like they're taking advantage of the market, right? Like
Truly.
to cash in. So I'm not sure there, I'm not sure.
All right, so let's get into some names because we're talking about the guys that the big name, and I shouldn't say names, the big names that are out there right now. You're looking at the primary conversation are these 3 guys, right?
Yes.
There's been a lot of conversation about Paul George, a lot of conversation about Jimmy Butler, a lot of conversation about LeBron James. What are your thoughts on these guys and what they could bring in terms of, and then who are you most favorable for?
Oh man. Yeah, with LeBron, I wonder, if I don't know if LeBron is going to look, and this kind of falls in the same category as Paul George, but I think with LeBron, from what I know and what I've read, it sounds like the Lakers really, really want to try to get Bronny James in a Laker uniform.
Yeah.
And they know, and that's smart business because they know that LeBron really wants to play with his kid.
Truly.
And so it kind of, I think the impression is that with LeBron that he's going to go wherever Bronny ends up going and, to finish out. And, LeBron's still a great player. It's amazing. He's ageless, like in terms of what he's been able to continue
Seriously.
to do. So it's not like you're doing this out of like, you're getting arguably the greatest of all time,
Absolutely.
late in his career. And that's not just something that brings like that. That isn't just like an on the court thing. There's a whole aura around that guy,
Oh, absolutely.
and so that would be that would be incredible. It would be insane. It's hard for me to imagine LeBron, being in a Sixers uniform.
Oh, absolutely.
know,
But like to me, like if I'm going out of these 3 guys, I'm going with the guy that's been the most successful in the playoffs, the guy that can be the coach on the court, the guy that has been in the battles and took his team to back-to-back NBA finals, that has won finals MVPs, that has been able to be successful at the highest level of this game. So to me,
yeah,
I'm if I got to pick out of these 3 guys, right? I'm going to pick LeBron James because I want the leadership. I want in those last minute struggles that we've just talked about. That's a guy that can be the ballast and kind of guide the guys on the court and be in that leadership role so that you don't have those moments like you had in game 2 where you lose the 5-point lead with 26 seconds left.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
I really think that to me Paul George is
Mhm.
a guy who you're getting an aging star. It's not even a superstar anymore. You're getting a guy who has had a very Tobias Harris ish playoff performance in all of his playoff appearances. Hasn't guided teams to Western Conference Finals. Jimmy Butler, okay, like there is some on-court success, but Jimmy Butler is also aging and kind of often injured. So, like I would have loved Jimmy Butler 4 or 5 years ago, absolutely. But Jimmy Butler now, I don't know. I would rather, if I'm going to pay the money, if you can get LeBron James on a big number, but short term.
Yeah.
So that it's not, you're not signing a 4-year deal. So he's playing into his early 40s, but like you sign him to a, what did he make 50 million this year? Something like that. Something crazy.
Yeah.
I have to go back through Spot Track. Something like his salary this year, 49.5. Right. So if you sign him for a 2-year, 110 million, right? Like as preposterous as that might sound, right? You sign him for 2 years. So you get essentially him with Embiid and Maxey for the next 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're gonna you overdraft his son in the first round in the mid-20s when he shouldn't be a consideration until the second round.
Right.
But you overdraft them so that they can play together, that they're on the same team. That's kind of where I'm going, because the other free agents, the other kind of avenues that we're kind of talking about, like, it looks like Siakam is probably going to take the bird rights and go back to Indiana because that's probably where he's going to get the biggest deal. And he likes the situation with he and Halliburton and what they have there in Indiana.
Sure.
The other guys at the top of this list, right? Like you're talking about Klay Thompson, who's aging, and you're talking about are you interested in DeMar DeRozan? Maybe like that. Those are guys that don't move the needle. The one guy that I like, who I saw in this last series, who I would be really interested in, is like OG Anunoby.
Yeah. I was actually
young, athletic wing that can be a scorer, that can be on, they can be the athletic wing that you thought you might get from Tobias Harris. He can be consistent from the outside. Like that's a guy that I'd be interested in.
Yeah. I was actually just saying after the Sixers next series, I was actually saying to some friends that I was, watching OG every night in that series. I was like, I was really impressed like with his game, and that was like the first time I had ever really gotten a good look at him. But he does a lot of good things. He offers you a lot of things out there, and I love that versatility. Like you mentioned George and Jimmy, and that's kind of where it is. With players like that, right? And I wonder, I still wonder, I think I've said on previous shows, I still wonder about Paul George and if this is like kind of like a, does he really want to come east? And, he's from LA. He's from the area there. Do you really want to come all the way across the map? And, let's just be honest about it. I mean, he's dealing with in LA, he's dealing with an often injured star there in like, hey, like we never have Kawhi. How come Kawhi's not playing? Is he really going to come all the way east and have the same questions about, well, why isn't Joel playing? You know what I mean? So
absolutely.
I do wonder if a lot of like the pomp and circumstance that we hear about PG, I wonder if that's more he's trying to just get more money out of the Clippers, and that he's really not looking to go anywhere.
If I had to guess, probably, yeah.
Yeah. So, and then with Jimmy, I'm with you there too. Like, I think when a guy plays here before and you feel like your organization made a mistake by letting him go, and things like that. I do think in general, and we're all guilty of it, but I think a lot of times we think of that player as the player he was when he was here prior. And I just don't know if Jimmy's that player anymore. And as you mentioned, he's often hurt and missing time. And, we saw in that end of season press conference, like Pat Riley pulled no punches as far as what he felt about Jimmy and him saying whatever he said about the Celtics. Oh, well, we would have been in that series if I was playing and all that other stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
Riley,
listen, Pat Riley did not mince words.
no, and he
Basically,
never had.
it basically told him to sit down and shut up because
Yeah,
you're not in those series. Like
yeah,
you can say whatever you want when you're not playing, but unless you're playing in those series, and listen, if there's anybody that has the clout to be able to say that to a guy, it's got like Pat Riley's been in the wars with a number of teams.
yeah, and much bigger stars than Jimmy Butler. So you know what I
Yeah.
mean. So Pat, you hear that from Pat, and that's like, wow, he wasn't. There was nothing.
Mark,
Nothing
I
he
got
would.
one more guy and I got one more topic for us to talk about before we jump out of here.
All right.
Brandon Ingram.
Yes.
Brandon Ingram is under contract through the 2025 season. So he's got 1 year left on his deal. He's going to make $36 million next year. If they could swing a trade, even if it's a 3-team deal. I know that the Sixers are basically essentially trading draft assets because they don't have guys under contract to be able to trade.
Right.
Pairing Brandon Ingram with Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid. Talk to me about how you feel about that.
I'm very enticed by Brandon Ingram. I think about what he's able to do out there on the wing, and I think he can really be the player that you really were hoping Harris would have been.
Yeah.
And in terms of like the Sixers don't have that guy, and you see it throughout the playoffs and things like that. The Sixers don't have that guy and haven't had that guy where it's like, yeah, the crux of what we do offensively runs through Tyrese and it runs through Joel. Obviously, they're both great players. We don't have that guy in our lineup that not only is versatile in, athletic wing, but he's also a guy that can fill the net and shoot it. I know that, I think Brandon Ingram in that, third, that trio, like the third guy of a trio, is really, really enticing to me, mostly because I know that he can fill it up when he's feeling good. And in a playoff series, if we could just get in a round 1 or a round 2, if you're the Sixers, if you can just get that guy that can go for 30 on a random night because he's just feeling himself and he, you know what I mean?
Right.
I think Brandon Ingram's that guy.
Yes.
And he's 28, so you're getting like the prime years there. So, I mean, he's at the top of my list in terms of like acquisitions. The other guys that we're talking about are bigger names, but I think if you do your best to draft Bronny and you do your best to try to lure LeBron east, that's one thing. But I just don't know that at this point, if a PG or a Jimmy or, you mentioned Clay, like these guys definitely can offer things, but I just don't know if they're the right fit for this team right now.
Right.
And I like the basketball fit with PG, but
to me,
it's the other stuff.
I look at Ingram and I say that's a deal that reminds me a little bit of the deal that Indiana did with Siakam. You get a guy a year before his contract's going to expire.
Yep.
You get an opportunity for him to play with the core of the team, and then you hold the bird rights to be able to negotiate the contract and offer him the most amount of money.
Yeah.
So, listen, on the way out, if there was ever a more fitting statistic to end the show with, Ben Simmons looked like Doctor Who and decided to show up at the Met Gala with this combination of menagerie of bullshit. Like, if there was ever a more fitting showing for who this guy is and the clown that he portrays himself to be, if there was ever a guy who was more disinterested in playing basketball and just interested in in everything that comes with being I don't even know the word. Ben Simmons, the length of time that he spent on the Met Gala red carpet, 210 minutes. The time he spent on an NBA court in 2024, 165.
Oh,
like, and the briefcase with the clock on it, the patent leather flannel combo with the fake plant vine coming down the sleeve. Like, what are we doing here? like he can just go away.
Yeah.
Like, he really can just go away. Can, like, if I were him, take your money, retire, just go be a celebrity. Like,
Yeah.
show up at the Met Gala, do whatever you want to do. In the summer, you can go in the lab and put out the highlight of you shooting in an empty gym.
Yeah.
But this, to me, Mark, was everything I needed to see about wrapping up this guy in terms of his celebrity status.
Oh, man.
Your thoughts on the way out?
Jeez, I don't know if we have enough time. Like,
give me your best minute, Mark.
Doctor Who, the clock just I just think of Flavor Flav with the clock on the briefcase. I'm not a fan of bow ties. Everybody that knows me, right? Like, weddings and things like that. I hate bow ties. I hate them. Straight solid tie, way better. I don't know what's going on with the flannel top here. This guy, I've never seen someone more disinterested in playing, like doing what they do for a living, but enjoying the celebrity status. And you know what's
Seriously.
crazy? It's like, beyond, like, with that, right? My favorite team, Andrew Bynum, played for my favorite team. You know what I mean? And this guy,
It's true.
This guy is more disinterested in them playing basketball than that guy. And
Man.
I never thought I'd see the day, but Ben, just hang him up, go out with some dignity and some honor.
Seriously.
You can get involved with all the supermodels and all and just, maybe there'll be a reality TV show coming down the pike on one of the streaming services for Ben.
Listen, Mark, I'm sure there will be. Who knows? Good gracious. Well, listen, we're gonna skip the commercials. We're gonna play the intro, outro for the Sixers and Flyers. I'll put the commercials back in later, but we'll on the back end of these videos, we'll talk all things Flyers. All right. Go Sixers ish, maybe.
Yeah.
Kind of, sort of.
Yeah,
funky,
go get Brandon
whatever.
Ingram. Because the next time,
I love it.
The next time we get on here and something doesn't happen, or something happens where we're not very happy about it, Daryl Morey, we haven't gotten to you yet. That's going to be about you. That show's going to be about you, and you're not going to like what we're going to have to say about it. So you better get it done.
On the way out.
Iverson, wow, what a fake off Daniels as he broke his ankles and got all the way to the cup.
We are part of the Fired Up Sports Network of shows. Please check out other Fired Up Sports Network podcasts like the P-Lot Pod, Water Cooler Talk, Bell Smashers, Philly Sports Love and Pain, Drunk on Broad, Beer Battered Sports, and the Fired Up Sports Show, which are available on all major podcasting hosting sites and social media. Also, check out Mark Ramos' Roundup on firedupsports.com, which breaks down the happenings going on with all your favorite local teams.
Listen, we're all things Flyers on Drunk on the Ice, episode 203. Mark, this is quite an interesting position to be in, right? We're coming into the off season. We've already done the recap. Let's start with the news that dropped this week. You've got there's a couple of things, right? We got some Mitchkoff news, right? There was a video that kind of leaked out, and then we also had the draft lottery that came out. So talk to me about where you are. Let's go. You want to go draft first? You want to go Mitchkoff first?
Yeah, we could do the draft first. Yeah.
All right. What do you got for me draft wise? Because the idea that we get we get the 12th pick. I know the last time we were talking together, we talked we talked briefly about the depth of this draft. So talk to me about where they've settled at the 12th pick and where you feel like this team might go.
Yeah, they're staying at 12. They were supposed to, I think that was like the most likely outcome, that they stay at 12. And I think a lot of people believe that this is like, I think some people would tell you that it's a 12-player draft. I kind of like, I like the I round up there to the top 15 because I kind of really like what I've seen from the top 15 guys. And they'll have an ability with this pick to and this has kind of happened for them in recent years, where they'll land a pick and there are players that are projected to go around that area where it kind of fills a need for them as well. So you're not just going best player available, but you're also getting a guy that like you really need. And I like that about this draft, that there are some players that should be available around where they're going to pick. Flyers need help on the left side. They need help down the middle. I think they're trying to address that even more so now after the Jamie Drysdale trade. So I really like, it's not a bad spot to be in, all things considered. And when you look at the season they had this year, it's not that, you can't be that upset, I think, with the 12th pick, considering the growth and the steps forward that were taken this year. So I like sitting at 12 for them. And, I think Helenius, Konsta Helenius, he's a centerman from Finland. I'm a big fan of his. I've been doing lots of research on his game, and he kind of seems to fit what they need. There's a lot of talk about Cole Iserman, who is a left wing out of the United States Developmental Program. And, with Iserman, I mean, you go back a year, people thought he was like, they thought he'd end up going in the top 3. And now he's kind of sliding down draft boards. I'm not really sure what that's about, but, maybe the Flyers will be able to take advantage of that, much like they did with the Mitchkoff thing a year ago.
I think for me, like that's a guy, that you and I have talked about, right? You're talking about if they're able to get a guy at 12 that was slated to go a little earlier in the draft, but has kind of fallen. They really don't need him to be the savior, right? But he can come in and eventually fill a role. If you're talking about a guy that in his time with the developmental team, right? He's got 127 career goals, right? He's been productive with this with the U.S. developmental team, and I think if you're able to get an opportunity to be able to add a guy like that to your farm system, the thing I like about where they are at 12 is that it's going to give them a lot of flexibility.
Right. Yeah. And there's always options there where, like, the Flyers are also armed with another first-round pick, which is Florida's. And, you can package them and try to move up if there's someone you really love and want to take. So there are options there. To go back to the Cole Iserman thing, I think the one thing about Cole that's really interesting is like I've read about Iserman a little recently some, and I kind of get the impression of him like as you saw by the number of goals he scored there for the US program, like most people think he's kind of like a one-way scorer, I think, where he's just a goal scorer. There's other
Mhm.
his game that kind of lack. But so really like a one-trick pony, but the interesting
Right.
thing about that is that that one trick that he does is really, really, really good. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Like his ability to be able to score. Obviously, you don't get to be at that level and scoring as proficiently at that level without that skill level.
Yeah.
So to me, in the position that the Flyers are in, you know, that for them to be able to package 12 and 30 to move up, you got to really, really be in love with somebody and feel like that's your only option is to get that guy.
Yeah.
Because I'm, in the position that they're in, right? They're going to pick I want to add as much talent depth as possible. So
Yeah.
I'm looking to pick, I want to pick guys at 12 and 30.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to turn around and I want to, if you're telling me I'm going to get 3 out of the top 51 picks, I want those 3 guys. I want those
Yeah.
guys, the opportunity to be able to bring those guys in and start building the depth of this farm system so that you have the opportunity to see what you have, because in 3 to 5 years,
Mhm.
those guys are either going to contribute on the ice or they're going to be part of a trade that
Right.
is going to bring a higher level elite player talent to add to a roster of guys that is ready to make a playoff run.
Yeah, that's very true, and I think as well, like one thing, like with the cap, the way it is, the salary cap and things
Mhm.
like that. Really, in a hard cap league, all you can do, or I think the most proficient thing you can do, is to like you have to put high marks and quite a bit of emphasis on the draft. You just have to. It's the only way um, you get competitive, number one, and then I think you stay competitive. As you said, like you either those guys come through your system and they contribute,
Mhm.
or you package them in other deals. But either way,
Right.
you have to have them in order to do that. And
Right.
so I think it's a really, all these drafts, for as long as we're willing to rebuild the or label the Flyer situation a rebuild, as long as we're doing that,
Mhm.
there should be quite a heavy emphasis on drafting players and um, drafting high end talent, which is what they're looking for. So, um, they have to do that. I like a lot of like as I said, I like a lot of the top 15 guys. There's defensemen in there. There's quite a few defensemen. Um, and it'll be fun when that time comes, because there's always rumors and innuendo running up to
Mhm.
that the draft. So who knows what'll happen between now and then.
And the good thing for me, Mark, is that you're also not drafting for need, right? You're in a
Mm,
position at those 2 picks in the first round and the one that you have in the second round at 51 that you can just sit there and take the best player available. You're
yeah,
not in a position where you're like, we got to take this guy because we need this guy in 2 years to be our, like, everybody is in position to search for the next great elite top level, Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews, elite level, top shelf scorer.
yeah,
Um, and hopefully you have a guy like that and a guy that we're going to talk about in a little bit in Mitchkov, who's going to come here in a couple years, or maybe sooner.
maybe.
Um, right. But like you're in a position where you can sit at 12, you can sit at 30 and just take the best guy available, take the guy that is the top guy on your board when that pick runs and and you look and you just keep building.
Yeah,
And that's the one thing that has impressed me, that even though, as this team ran into the playoffs, into that playoff push, that they still kind of, the front office still kind of kept their eyes on the prize in knowing that this team was not going to make, a long playoff run, that if they got the playoff experience, great. But if they didn't, it wasn't the end of the world. They were still making, that they make the deal at the deadline, to trade off assets for guys that they know weren't going to be a priority to re-sign, coming into this offseason. That, to me, the patience for the process and understanding where they need to be able to get to where they want to go,
Yeah.
tells me that they could go. The most likely scenario for them is that they sit at 12, they sit at 30, they take the best guy available, and then they just keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what they'll do unless something comes along where it's just like, no brainer to package them or whatever the case is.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what they'll do. I think that's what they'll do. And yeah, the draft is one of my favorite times of the hockey season. Probably next to just the actual games themselves, like when camp
Right.
starts and things like that. Just because you get to read up on these guys, and many of them are very many of these young players. I mean, they're so gifted today. Like they come in so gifted already,
Mm-hmm.
and and they're to think that they're that young and that good, is it's exciting. It's exciting, especially for a team that's looking ahead.
It is. I like the way that you're putting that, because to me that's gotta be the center of the way that you plan the
Mhm.
next couple years.
Yeah.
But is there a guy? Give me a guy that you think that they could fall in love with and trade up for.
Oh man. Um. Yeah. I'm trying to think. I mean, I think.
Is there a guy that you've fallen in love with? Is there a guy that you would pat? If there's a guy that you would package 12 and 30 to
Yeah.
move up for, who's the guy?
There is. I think it's Tage Ginla, the
Okay.
Jerome's son, Jerome McGinley's son. I would absolutely I love his game. I absolutely love his game. I think he's a chip off the block, as they say.
Okay.
And I think that that's actually a realistic possibility that like they could feasibly do that. I think
Okay.
the Flames pick it, and I think they're picking ninth.
Okay.
So I just also think there's no way Calgary's going to let their franchise legend, former captain's son,
Get
not
to them, right? Yeah.
not go like them not make that pick. I can also imagine just Flames fans just being completely in, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
absolutely.
So I love
But
his game.
I'll
I
tell you,
really
Mark,
do.
the mock draft that I'm looking at on NHL.com has the Flyers taking him at 12.
Mm,
If that
okay.
happens, I'd be
Yeah,
thrilled.
I would be thrilled. I really like him. He reminds me so much of his father, not so much in physical, because Jerome was kind of like a power wing type. I
Yeah.
think T's just more of he's more offensively driven of a player, and I just his game. I there's a lot of skill there, and there's something about those guys too. The guys that they grow up in that environment like almost
Yeah.
immediately.
The way that they're describing him, right, is that he may not have the dynamic skill that pulls people out of their seats, but his playmaking ability, vision, and hockey sense make him a special player.
Yeah, and those are
Those
qualities.
sound like attributes of a guy that I'd love to add.
Yeah, and I think the Flyers he would fit what the Flyers need
Mhm.
in terms of that. They need playmaking that way. Um, and I think they prioritize players typically in drafts. Like the Flyers really look at hockey sense, and I think their scouts really, that's something that's quality they look for. Nobody's ever told me that. It's just based on the
Mhm.
selections they've made in the past, and all. I think that's something that they prioritize. And so yeah, he would be my ideal choice, and I
Okay.
think that could actually really happen. So
I love it. I love it. Let's get to the news that kind of, set Flyers social media ablaze. Um, the video that comes out of Matvey Michkov, which I'm gonna pull up right now, working out at what we later find out is a gym in New York City. But the T-shirt is what kind of put everybody on notice.
yeah,
He's working out in Flyers gear, Mark. It's I think the Flyers social media is not immune to knowing what's going on, and I'm sure they were aware of him being stateside, but the idea of him being stateside, working out in Flyers gear, it really does fast track the thought process for how quickly could you possibly add him to this
yeah,
roster.
yeah, and that stuff's out there about his situation in Russia with Sky, the program that he plays with over there, and um, so I think what's interesting about that is like it seems too like the Flyers have a pretty good relationship with the KHL situation
Yeah,
there. And you know, does he come? I don't know that. I think next year, I think next season, which I think would be about a season earlier than we anticipated.
yeah, I
I
think
I
so.
I think that that would be the most feasible thing. I'm sure that this is something that these deals with trying to bring these kids over can be real delicate. But Briere, from what Briere has said, it kind of seems as if the Flyers are pretty like, hey, like we're going to be ready when he gets here, whenever that is, and we're going to keep in contact with his program, and and if we can get him here sooner, or a situation arises where we can do that, they'll do that. Um,
Yeah,
so
I think the way the progress that you saw them make with the what they were able to work out with the club to bring Fedotov over early,
mhm,
it would not surprise me if something like that comes about,
yeah,
that they're able to be in a situation where they can get him over earlier than they anticipated.
yeah,
Um, I think next season is obviously unreasonable, but it would not surprise me if what would that be, the 25-26 season,
yeah.
if that's the if for this franchise, if that's the target date.
Yeah. Yeah, I could totally I could see that. I could see that based on what reports and things like that that I've seen out there. I think there's a decision looming that uh, regarding him coming in June,
Yeah,
whether or not he'll be.
I'm just pulling up the article now, but yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens there. Um, but yeah, I mean, they're already, like, I think, preparing for his arrival. If you look at like the roster standpoint, even last year, I mean, guys like Tippett, who are natural right wingers, they were playing the left side. They were playing left wing. Not only do the Flyers they have an overabundance of right wingers, and they need left wingers, so I think they were trying to convert a couple. But there was also, I think they're trying to make that room for Mitch Koff to be here
hmm
soon. So that's really, really exciting. I mean,
yeah.
we've been watching highlight tapes of this kid doing really incredible things offensively for a while now, and to think about him coming over here, the anticipation, I'm sure, is very, very high.
Oh, it's it's one that would light the Flyers internet on fire.
Yeah,
um, I'm sure the custom Flyers jerseys with whatever number it would be. I know. Listen, I know our good buddy Mike with Fired Up has already he's already ordered and has the
already got it.
He's already got the custom 39. I'm really praying, Mike, that the 39 is the number that he chooses. But
Yeah.
oh, good Lord. Good Lord. Listen, Mark, the one thing I want to touch on before we jump out of here, there was some off the ice news with Bundy, with Chris Tarian, who did some work with the Pennsylvania state legislators to talk with them about recovery and how they can help with the alcohol rehabilitation, drug and to know that you still got guys that are still invested in the community and still invested in people,
Yeah.
and the Flyers community is a really cool thing to know.
Yeah. Yeah. Bundy's really
No. Yeah. Listen, I missed all these. The boss lady is awake, so she's she's putting her 2 cents in. Lace, I'll fill you in about our Russian phenom Matvey Michkov as soon as the show's over. But talk about Bundy and talk about his contributions off the ice.
Yeah. I know he's really, really he's really been doing a lot for that kind of like drug and alcohol abuse kind of things. And I think it's something near and dear to Chris's heart, and something that he's passionate about. And he's one of these guys too, like, and there's so many that are still involved. They're not only still around the city, but they're involved in the city as well. And Bundy, being one of the top guys, but there's so many like former players and things like that in the area doing things like that. And, and that's great stuff. And, I hope it all works out for Chris, and, he's able to, actually, it's funny, when I was in college, I actually met him at I was working at the Blue Cross River Rink.
Okay.
In college, and he was actually there with his daughters, and he took a picture with me and everything like that. Just completely, he was on skates too. He was out skating on the rink, and he came off, and I asked if I could get a picture with him, and he was super gracious and nice, and took time to talk to me, and an absolute like mountain of a man. Even on
I'm sure.
he was huge. So yeah, Chris seems like really good people.
Yeah, listen, if you get a chance, the Bundy recovery, the social media page, the website really does offer a lot of good information about anybody that's struggling with addiction, any kind of addiction, any kind of mental health issues. So go check out the Bundy recovery social media stuff, the website, especially for anybody who might be struggling with any kind of addiction. That the resources and the information is out there to be able to kind of get people the help that you need. Mm-hmm. Mark, anything Flyers related before you want to jump out and you want to?
Yeah, I mean, it's been kind of quiet as far as the Flyers go lately. That's why that Michkov news was so significant too. I think it got dropped at a time where it's kind of like a kind of a lull in the news cycle when it comes to the team and stuff. But yeah, I think as we said before on the earlier show, when we were talking about the NBA playoffs, the NHL playoffs have been really wild and things like that. And this I have a particular interest in that, as we said about the draft, particular interest in that Boston Bruins Florida Panthers series. So it feels
nice.
It feels dirty though, rooting for the Bruins. I can't go that far.
So Mark, on the way out, I got two things for you. Are the Toronto Maple Leafs the NHL's version of the Philadelphia 76ers? I didn't realize this, but they've lost some crazy amount of games. They've lost like 4 game 7s against the Bruins?
Yeah.
Like they've had just as much playoff success as the Sixers. Like, are they versions of each other?
I think so. They really mirror each other. Just from, and also like the constant It's just like 0 days without nonsense when it comes to both teams. Like there's always
Right.
something.
They fire the Maple Leafs fire their head coach.
Yep. And I think that there's going to be some more changes there probably this summer. So we'll keep an eye on that because I mean, that's an interesting situation to monitor for hockey fans, especially if, your favorite team's able to get a hold of one of them top players in Toronto.
Seriously, like you could that could shift the balance of power somewhere else in the East. The other thing, Mark, talking about feeling dirty and not wanting to, like, the thought process that I'm going through mentally, knowing that we could potentially see Eastern Conference Finals in both the NHL and the NBA, that could be New York versus Boston,
Yeah.
makes
Wow.
me want to just like turn the TV off. Like the thought process that I think about as a sports fan. Listen,
Yeah.
not in life. Obviously, in life it means like almost nothing. But
Right.
like the thought that you're going to have two cities that are both our rivals have the opportunity to have essentially a 2-week run where they're just going to be every night going back and forth between, the potential right now to have Knicks, Celtics, Rangers, Bruins essentially every other night, just have one versus the other.
Yeah.
Makes me kind of want to throw up in my mouth a little bit.
It looked it there. It looked like you were pushing it down a little bit.
I don't I don't want any part of it.
Yeah, I don't either. That seems horrible. And then like the coverage of it is gonna, I'm sure there'll be, TNT has both NHL and NBA rights for like major, games and stuff. So then like I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of cross pollinating there with the crews and things like that. And I don't want to see that. I don't think anybody wants to see that unless you live in those two cities. And like with Boston, I think just I like they've won enough. Like haven't they won enough? Like
Yeah.
come out of the Pats dynasty. The Celtics are good. I guess the Sox are not. The Red Sox are kind of.
Yeah.
Are they good this year? I'm not even sure.
Listen, Baltimore Yankees. They're going to have enough competition there. Mark,
Yeah.
listen, it just kind of is what it is. We'll be back with another off-season edition for both teams. Once we'll wait a little bit, wait for some other news to drop, some other stuff to happen. But
Sure.
listen, on the way out, Mark, Mark's got a lot of good Union stuff. If you're looking for some Union coverage over the summer, we've got he's got the Ramos Roundup. We got some good places to find a lot of good content. Go check out the other good shows at the Fired Up. We got a lot of good shows on the network, so go check them out. But on the way out, go Flyers.
Go Flyers.